With that being said, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Reed Bergraby. I'm in the United States Army up at Fort Leavenworth. This summer I retired after 25 years, and Keystone's been nice enough to bring me down here to Keystone Development Corporation to help me learn how to be an entrepreneur, or how to learn the Kansas City area, and really just unlearn the Army stuff I've been learning for 25 years. And so part of that told me I had to sing for my supper. They said I did a Keystone session, so I found it on Monday. I'm going to do a session. And what I want to talk to you about, though, is something I know a lot about, the Army does a lot about, is Army decision-making processes. So we have a lot of decisions we've got to make, and I think they can be applicable to businesses as you're looking at things. I'm going to try to help explain things. I'll try to use the right words. It's almost like speaking a second language, though, when you're in the Army for long enough. You learn to speak one way, it's kind of hard speaking another, so just bear with me as I'm talking through things. What I'm showing you is a way. You may already have a process you're doing already for your business or organization. It's not saying that yours is wrong, mine is right. Yours is right, mine is wrong. I'm just showing you a different way of doing things. I do know our way's been around since 1932 based on research I've been doing. It's adjusted and grown over time based on how the situation has changed. There's a history to it that's been lost in blood and treasure to learn what the process I'm going to show you through. Here's our agenda real quick. I'm going to talk about what a problem really is. I'll take you through our first process, the operations process. I'll show what a leader does in that process. There's 4 steps to it: plan, prepare, and execute. I'll show 4 different planning processes, 1 execution process, how we assess a little bit of it, a quick summary, then go into resources. So for a 40-minute discussion here, I'm going to move in pretty fast. I'm going to be talking about what's the big ideas, and really the hows I'm not going to have time to get into too much. I'll try to do as much as I can, but I know there's a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So if there's interest after this, just let me know. I might do a different Keystone address following up on more something on a different topic. Just let me know as we go through here. So first off, a problem. Problem is easy, right? It's anything that helps you from getting to your goal. Now, you can take a big problem, and you look at this, there's really 3 problems you're looking at, right? There's a great Civil War guy trying to figure out he's got to defeat an alligator, he's got to climb a cliff, and defeat a nice cartoon Darth Vader up there. If you do it all at one time, it's a pretty hard thing to do. So sometimes it's just easier to break a problem down into smaller bite-sized pieces. Hey, how do I defeat the alligator first? Let me get this first thing out of the way, and now I can figure out how to climb the cliff. Now I can figure out how to defeat Darth Vader, right? Just take your time. Some people get overwhelmed by the problem that's so large and so complex, they forget they can break it down, make it easy to understand. And how you describe a problem is going to describe how you're going to solve it. And I'll show you a couple examples of that as we go through here later in the discussion. So what drives our discussion here, and before I start, I stole all these graphics from the Army, so you'll see commander, you'll see staff, some other stuff in here. Anytime you see the word commander, think leader or decision maker. If you see staff, think the rest of the team. And so that's what's going here. I'm going to try to describe and speak the language of leaders, but you'll see commanders popping up through. That's the language I sort of know and understand. Any process we see is to do something, you got to plan, prepare, execute is how you do it. And the entire time, then you see assess all the time. You're constantly assessing your actions. Do I have the right plan? Am I preparing correctly? Is this executing correctly? So it's always assessing. All of it's being done by the commander, that leader of the organization in the center. And that leader has special responsibilities. And also, please don't blame me. This isn't supposed to be pink. It's supposed to be gray and just projects up funny. So any pink stuff is gray things as you're looking at it. The commander, though, has to understand the environment. He visualizes, describes, directs action, and then he leads through the process, and he assesses what's going on in that process. Again, that assessing is a large part of what's going on. It's constant change, because for us, as we do operations, we have an enemy doing things to us. The enemy's if I'm trying to punch him, he's trying to punch me back and trying to dodge my punch. So I'm constantly assessing what my actions are doing, what the enemy's doing, and how I need to reassess to make sure my punch and my blows land as I'm trying to do things. It may be different for your business. You may not have that enemy or that competition you're working with, but something that's our framework, how we're thinking about things. Going a little more depth to look at things here. Understanding, the first step of doing it. Only the leader can understand what's going on. Everybody has an idea, they see a piece of it, but the team brings together that leader, that pure understanding. That understanding, we break it down to operational environment, the threat, and major challenges. When we say operational environment, it's easy to say, hey, I'm worried about the environment. Well, we break it down and subdivide into what the operational environment is, right? If I'm attacking an enemy, I'm not worried about how many Kentucky Fried Chickens are in the area, right? It doesn't affect what I'm doing. That's not part of the environment I'm concerned about. So if you're a tech firm, understand there's a jewelry store next to you, may or may not be important to your environment as you're looking and thinking about it. So it's easy to get overwhelmed by how big the environment is, but you have to narrowly define it so you understand and work through it a little bit better. Same with threat. A threat for you may be a different competition out there, maybe a different company, or maybe just be people themselves. They may not want your new idea. So how do you get your idea across to the threat, that threat of change that most people have a fear of as they're looking at things? And lastly, any other problems that come up as you're doing things? Ways you can help understand things. There's books out there, there's research you can do, there's think tanks that have all sorts of white papers you can look at and think about the problem you're looking at. You just go driving around. Sometimes just seeing things in action, seeing how people operate and do things, that can help you as you're trying to understand your environment that your business is trying to work in. You can talk with your team. Your team has an idea what's going on too. They have a piece of the pie. They understand things. They see things differently from you. They have a different place and different lens they're looking at to describe things. Then work that network. That network you have, that's the reason you have that network out there. They have different lenses, different people they talk to, different areas they go around at, different ideas they see, all part of putting another piece of the puzzle to fill out the map you need to understand the environment. With that understanding, that leader, that decision maker is going to come up with what's called an operational approach. And I'll go a little bit more detail on this in a minute. They understand they have to get a desired end state. They visualize like, hey, right now I want to open a business, and my desire is to have a functional coffee shop when I get done with this. But you know what? Probably I first need to buy a space. I need to do things. There's an approach I can take doing this. And there's no one right or wrong approach to how I do things. And like I said, I'll talk more about that in a minute. But you got to visualize and make sure everybody on your team is on the same approach. If everybody's thinking differently, that's when you're going to have problems. And so that part of that job, that leader, is have that understanding, develop the approach that your team, your business is going to follow through on, and then describe that to your team. You may be pattern reincarnate, had the best ideas in the world, the next Bill Gates, but if you can't tell it to people, if you can't describe it, if you can't get it out of your head, it's worthless. It just sits up there and you're going to be stuck with your thoughts. You got to be able to put it in a way that people understand it, they can chew on it, they can think about it. But you don't get that until you have that understanding, and then you can visualize your approach of where you want to go. By then, you can describe out where you want to do and look at things. The way we do that in the Army, we have two things. If anytime I tell someone to do something, I always give them a what and a why. Hey, I need you to go out and do a Keystone speech. Why? I want you to spread knowledge into the world. Right? A what and a why. The why is never going to change, but the what can. Maybe I can figure out, hey, maybe a Keystone session isn't the best way to get information across. Maybe I can do a blog post on the internet. That's a better thing to do than the Keystone session. I can change the what's, I can't change the why. But as I get those tasks, I'll have a bigger idea called the commander's intent. The commander's intent is the way the commander, the leader, that decision maker of the organization can spread the idea, make sure everybody understands what's going on, and they can make changes. They don't have to go back and ask permission or mother may I. They can operate as long as they operate in that intent. They can make decisions and execute what's going on. And again, for us, it's a very dynamic environment. We have the enemies trying to do things. They don't have time to go back and ask permission for the boss to go somewhere. And so for them, they got to understand that intent very well and quickly execute and change operations very quickly. Again, your organization may be slower, but by following this understanding, they have a purpose of how you're fitting the bigger picture, what things we have to do, then what end state, what does right look like? What does your organization, where are you trying to go? Hey, I want to build in 1 year $1 million corporation that's doing X, Y, and Z. That's a clear defined end state. Everybody knows what we're working towards. If I'm doing an action that's taking me away from the end state, that's probably an action I shouldn't be doing. And it helps remove excess waste of effort and time and resources, and make sure everybody's focused and pulling towards the same direction of where they're trying to go. So that being said, that's the leader's role in the operations process. The first step is planning. So here's a classic picture of General Eisenhower before D-Day talking to paratroopers getting ready to jump in to France as you're looking at things. He has this famous quote, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. The plan is going to change. The plan you come up with is going to change. The enemy, as we say, gets a vote. The environment is going to change. Something's going to happen. But because you spent time thinking about it, understanding what's going on out there, how things are looking, what's happening, you can adjust off of that. You have a known point that you can adjust now what you're trying to do. But if you just go out there and try to wing it, it's all going to be luck. But you can control luck up to a certain point. Then you sort of got to go out there and see what happens when you roll the dice. So that being said, we see really two parts of planning. There's an art side to it, the conceptual side to it, the big idea, that visionary. That's what that leader, that person at top comes up with. Hey, I got this big idea. I want to start a coffee shop. I want to have a new business. I want to have solutions for people. Really big idea, very conceptual. As we say, it's a big hand on a map, right? I want all these people to go this way and do good things. That's a concept. doesn't do anything unless you get details put to it. And when you have a team, at least in our organization, you have the leader come up with the idea, then a team putting the science behind that. Hey, boss, do you realize it costs this much money to buy a coffee shop? Hey, boss, if we want to open in St. Louis, it's a 4-hour drive to get there. We can't do that. We can't be there in 2 hours to have your concept going by. Hey, if we want to make a teleport device, we have some little bit of science to do. They're the realists going on. But if you have too much of one side, right? If a guy thinking concepts, thinking big ideas, he's got to be grounded in reality. That concepts drives details, details influence concepts. So if they aren't tying together, sort of that yin-yang relationship, nothing's going to happen. But by those two guys working together, that's rocket fuel, man. That's where the magic happens. We have a big idea, reality is affecting it, and reality is influencing what that big idea boss is thinking. That's when amazing things happen. Real quick, I throw this up here to help understand where we're coming from when we talk about things. We see, as we look at warfare, there's really 3 levels of war. There's a strategic level, an operational level, and a tactical level. Tactical level, this is the day-to-day things, very small battles, engagements, small actions. We call this being the knife fight. This is where most businesses work on the day-to-day operation, right? You're worried about how am I taking care of the customer coming in the door right now? Hey, how much toilet paper do we have in the restroom right now? Hey, do we have enough budget to make payroll this month? You're in that knife fight, day-to-day operations, not thinking very far out, very narrow focus, can't see things. At the operation level, you're tying these small battles, engagements, and events together to have a major operation as you're looking at things. How can I make these things last longer? How can I make payroll now for 6 months? How do I make payroll for a year? How do I get more customers to do things? Looking at bigger and longer as you're looking at things. Last strategic idea, hey, how do I last 5 years? How do I scale this to be across the U.S., across the country, across the world, right? That's bigger and deeper. And so each of these areas have different problems. They have different time horizons, right? If I'm worried about someone shooting at me, I got seconds to just make a decision. If I'm worried about how to invade Kuwait, and again, sorry if you couldn't tell, this is Operation Desert Storm as an example, just showing the different levels going on during Operation Desert Storm. If I'm trying to figure out how to free Kuwait from Iraq back in the day, I got a little more time, right? It took about 3 months to build up, 100 hours of war. It took a lot of time, but a lot more different than here. So how I think about things, how I do things can be a little different based on time and the resources I have at my disposal. So that being said, I got 4 examples I want to show and talk to you through here very briefly, and I'll go in each one of these more in a minute. If we look conceptually, we do what's called design. So a lot of people think about the art side about it. We actually do Army design methodology, originally created by the Israelis, that we sold back in the 80s from them, and it helps us with the conceptual ideas. When it comes to detailed stuff, we have the military decision-making process, MDMP, and we have troop leading procedures. I'll go into the difference of those here in a little bit, what they look like. And actually, something that just came about in our doctrine just recently is a new thing called the Army problem-solving process. This is really applicable at any times, and you can see the similarities, and I'll start with this one, because I think it's sort of the easiest as we go through and describe things. So 7 steps in the Army problem-solving process. Doesn't have a very good acronym that comes out. APSIF doesn't really roll off the tongue very well. But some people will argue they're an 8 based on the assessment piece again. Again, you're looking at things going on. Your first step is you're trying to understand the problem. You're gathering information. You have facts and assumptions. This is like playing poker in real life. You don't know what your opponent has. You don't know that your opponent doesn't know what you have. There's information that you don't know that's going on there, but you got to make a decision. Hey, I don't know where the KC Royal Stadium is going to go, but as I start a business, I need to make a decision, right? So I got to make an assumption. I got to make a decision and go forward. I can't just assume, or I can't say facts, this is what's going to happen, but I know it's going to impact my business. I know it's going to have an impact on what's going on. So I got to make an assumption as I'm going through there. That doesn't mean I stop with that assumption. I have to then confirm or deny that assumption is true or not. If it changes, I come back to this step, to step 1, and start over again, because that's going to change how I come to my problem, my solution, right? My problem is different now. My environment has changed, so I have to change my solution. So you're always looking at facts and assumptions to understand what's going on and come back to things. With that information, now you're going to understand the environments. That boss is back, that leader's role, understanding. You got the facts and assumptions. You're going to try to identify the problem. If you pick the wrong problem to solve, you're wasting time, money, and resources. So finding that right problem and trying to figure out, it can be hard. During World War II, the U.S. Army was losing a lot of their bombers going to France. They came back, and they brought all the brigadier minds together, flew them over to London, said, hey, all these bombers, we're only getting like 20% back when they go out for flights. Can you help us to make it better? But here's the problem, right? If I put more weight to armor this thing up, the planes get heavy, they can't fly. Yeah. And oh, by the way, steel's expensive. The more I spend, I don't have a lot of money to spend on this. I can give about 3 to 5 places I can put some armor on to protect these planes better. Where do you think we should put these 3 to 5 pieces of armor on the plane? So the minds all got together. Every plane that came back, they did a survey, they checked them out, they saw what bullet holes were on there, and they realized where these red circles are, every plane that came back they were shot up at these locations. They're like, well, these are where the holes are. This is where we need to put the steel plates at. And so everybody's getting ready to go, and then one guy at his hand goes, hey, so wait a minute. So you're telling me that 20% of the planes made it back, and this is where they came back and they survived. So all the planes that we lost got shot everywhere else. Maybe somewhere else is where we need to put our resources into. And so maybe covering the engines and the cockpit where the pilots are, maybe that helps get planes back alive instead of doing the stuff where all these guys made it back already. But millions of dollars in time and effort were getting ready to get spent until that one guy said something, because everybody analyzed the problem wrong. So as you look at it, problem development and problem stating can only be done by that leader, that decision maker. So that's that person's job. They define it, they say what right looks like, they understand what the operational approach is. That's what they get paid for in our job to figure out. And so to help with that, once you identify the problem, know what you're trying to solve, then you got to develop your criteria as you start coming up with ways you want to solve it, your options, your solutions that you're looking for. And so as you develop your criteria, we have 2 types of criteria. We have screening criteria and evaluation criteria. Before you come up with your options, you want to come up with these criteria, because that way you're not biased, or you're trying to hinder bias as you come up with your solutions. It's easy to say, hey, my solution is the best solution because I came up with it, right? But you want to take that bias out. You're trying to find the right answer. You don't care about being right. You want to find the right answer. And to do that, you got to screen your solutions out. And so when we screen criteria out, we call it what's called FAST DC. Feasible, acceptable, suitable, distinguishable, and complete. Peace in the Middle East. Some people say, hey, a suitable solution is I can drop a nuclear bomb in the Middle East. I'll take care of things. That'll be taken care of. Other people argue that's probably not very feasible, not very suitable, not very acceptable as you're looking at things. So that probably, we don't need to spend time on figuring out how we're going to get a nuclear bomb in the Middle East to do something. That's not a valid course of action, not a valid option that we want to do. So as you're looking at the valid ones, you're trying to figure those out. 2 things I found the hard way. A, you want to make sure your course of action you come up with, they're unique enough, they're different. You're not just like, hey, I'm going to walk across the stage, I'm going to walk over here on this side, and then my other option, if I want to get across the stage, I'm going to walk over here. Not really different, right? I'm walking the stage from left to right, I'm 3 feet difference, not a big difference in those courses of action that I'm trying to solve and how to walk across the stage. Also, don't forget, we talked about earlier about that complex problem. Hey, if you're planning to try to get that top to fight Darth Vader, you can't forget about that alligator and stop there. Hey, I solved this problem. Woohoo, I'm done. No, you still got to get to the top of the cliff and beat Darth Vader. Don't forget that. Have a complete course of action. Once you have a course of action, then that's your screen. Make sure you have the right one. Then you got to evaluate them. There's ways you can assign ways to compare them. And what you're trying to find is your cost, benefits, and trade-offs as you're looking at them. And everybody argues as you come up with your possible solutions or your options. What's the magic number everybody comes up with, right? It's 3. Hey, here's a hard way, here's an easy way, and here's the middle way. And whatever everybody always picks, right? They're Goldilocks. They pick. Okay. They pick the middle route. So what happens? You don't bring 3, you bring 4. Let the boss see 4 options. You got the hardest, the easiest, and now you got 2 middle options. Now you're forcing the boss to think about trade-offs. Hey, if I spend an extra $10,000, what does that get me? Hey, if I spend another month on this project, what does it get me? By having those 2 middle functions, that helps drive that forcing function for people to think. 3 options, everybody just fix the middle one and go. Possible solutions, so once you have your criteria to evaluate them, you bring out and you analyze them. There's various tools and techniques. It can be as complicated, as simple as just sitting around a whiteboard and talking through, hey, if I'm a customer, walk me through your process. So step 1 of the process is this. They'll see this screen on the website, and they'll do this, they do this. Okay, that's a good process. Well, did you think about this or that? There's a way to think about it that way. It can be as simple as just sitting around talking. Or it can be what we do. We'll actually build a mock-up, a scale model, follow it through and see how it looks, what's going on. There's various ways to analyze your different options as you're looking at things. Once you get on analyzing it, using your eval criteria you came up with already now, Now you come up with your best solution. You compare those results, look at that, and come up with which one you think is best. So it's a way to compare things, think about things. Now, does this always come up with the best solution? No. Does it come up with the best that you can think of, and especially the time that you have? Yes. So it's a pretty good process if you need to come up with something. Then lastly, once you have the solution determined, you got the best solution you think, it's time to decide and act. You got to execute, and we always say execute violently. Something I found interesting, once I found this out, I've always been amazed by. Does anyone know the background of the word decide? Decide is a Greek word. As you break it down, you look at side, C-I-D-E, it means to kill. Regicide, genocide, fratricide, it means to kill. D in the front, options. When you make a decision, you're cutting off options. You're getting rid of options, you're picking one thing, and that's the thing you're going forward with. Once I found out, decide became a much more different word to me. It's a much more powerful word. When you think about when you make a decision, you're cutting off options, you're committing resources, and you're making a difference. That's what you're doing. Any questions before I go on? Is there anything else about the Army, this process? I think I got you guys in a wonderful spot right now. All right. So the next one I want to talk about is ADM, Army Design Methodology. The Army realized, this slide you see is a slide that's briefed to General McChrystal back when he was in Afghanistan. It didn't resolve about a 4-hour brief. They went through every line, every color note on here, talked through everything, and had this slide come up. In my business, we call this the spaghetti chart. And McChrystal famously said, hey, once we understand this slide, we can win the war. But it's a very complex, unfamiliar problem of trying to fix Afghanistan, right? It's not easy. There's no right answer of what right looks like. Where do you go? What do you want to do? It's very hard and very complicated. And so the system we came up with, stealing from the Israelis back in the 80s, is the Army Design Methodology. It's a way to think about problems, understand them, visualize them, be able to describe them, and develop a concept that other processes then can figure out how the details get applied to it. And just like most things in life, it's easy to learn but hard to master. So as you look at it, first thing you're trying to do is create your operational environment. Hey, where am I? What's going on? What do the things look like now? Hey, what do I want it to look like? Where am I going? What do I want to do? Well, hey, guess what? There's probably going to be a delta, a difference. That's going to create the problem for me. Now I know what I got to solve, right? There's a difference at delta. How do I solve for delta? Now I'm going to develop an operational approach, which I then can create a plan. And so for me, an easy example to come about this, hey, my current state, my bank account every month is going down in money. I'm losing money. That's my current state. Where do I want to be? I want every month, at the end of the month, I want my bank account going up. I want to be making money. That's what I want to do. So what's the problem? Right now, here's the fun part. Here's how I frame it, right? Hey, I'm not making enough money. I need to find a second job, right? If I'm not making enough money, my operational approach, I find a second job. Hey, I'm spending too much. I need to cut spending. Both approaches, how to find the problem, creates a different approach. Both solve the problem, but they're different. And of course, when you have a boss, the boss wants a hybrid, right? Boss will say, hey, you need to get a second job and cut spending. That's how we're going to do things. But now that once I know what my approach is, whether I need to get a second job, whether I need to cut spending, now I can make a next plan. Hey, here's how I'm going to get a second job. Hey, here's how I'm going to analyze my finances. That's the next process I'm going to show you. Any quick questions on this one before I move on? All right, the next process I'm going to show you is called the Military Decision-Making Process, MDMP for short. I like this one much better. The Marine Corps have one. It's called MCPP, Marine Corps Planning Process. It's just fun to say, so I had to say it, and I also make fun of my Marine Corps brethren. But also, if MCPP made it as what they want to call it, what didn't they pick? It scares me at times. What you see here, there's 7 steps to this process, very similar to what we said the Army decision-making, the problem-solving process earlier. There's things the leader does. There's things the team does. But it's a known problem. It's a little more robust, but it's a way to bring different viewpoints together to analyze a problem and come up with a solution. And we talked about there's imperfect information going through, but you have assumptions you work through the process. Part of MDMP is it's a process. It's not always going to give you the right answer, but it's going to give you the best answer you can. Because sometimes you only have an hour to come up with a solution. I've seen that MDMP take up to a year to do. So there's all different time horizons, and based on your time horizons is what you come up with to try and integrate different ideas and different people together. But our rule of thumb, as we look at it, hey, understanding that problem, the receipt of mission, the mission analysis, as you go through and start beginning your action, course of action, COA, course of action or your options, should take about half your time. Try and figure out whether your course of action is valid or not, comparing them, making an approval, and try and get that order out to let your subordinates know. That takes about another half your time. There's some details you can put into it. What people don't realize, MDMP can be used for an organization about 300 in size to about 60,000. If the boss a commander makes a decision for a 60,000 man organization, it takes time to get that order out to everybody in that organization so they know what's going on. So if you have a large organization, or if you ever scale up to being large, knowing that how long it takes that word to get distributed has to be part of your planning process and what you're thinking about, what you're doing. So don't lose sight of that as you're looking at things. I'm just going to show 2 quick examples here. I don't want to go into too much detail in this process. Step 1, receipt of mission. This is better known as the plan to plan. Hey, I need to make a plan. I need to come up with something. How am I going to do that? All right, hey guys, let's gather around the whiteboard and let's talk. That's what you're doing, receipt of mission. Hey, you're telling everybody to come together. That's how we're going to set conditions for the plan. Hey, we're all getting locked in this room. We're not leaving this room until we come up with a good idea. That's your plan to plan. That's how you're setting conditions and receiving your mission. The next step is mission analysis. This is, again, trying to understand the environment, frame the problem, and figure out, make sure you're solving the right problem as you're doing things. There's 17 sub-steps for this thing. Don't look at all that. Get focused really on the problem or the purpose at the top, and look at the outputs. As this process goes through, outputs here equals inputs in the next step. As that changes and grows, and as what builds, goes on. But again, if something changes back in an early step in step 2, if your assumption becomes invalid, your course of action later on probably is invalid too. You need to come back to step 2 and restart. This is an iterative process. It doesn't stop just because you're done. Oh, step 2, I'm done. If something changes, you're going back to the beginning and start going on as you're looking at things. As we all know, there's a lot of data in the world running around, and part of mission analysis is trying to figure out the right data and getting the boss. We have what's called the information pyramid. It's helping us see information, decipher it, and do good things with it. And so the questions you always ask, you're looking at things, hey, that's great, you're telling me something. What's the so what of it? Is a common phrase you'll hear military people say, hey, so what? So what? But therefore, if you get the which means and therefore the information, that's where you try and get the boss to know, and it helps them make better decisions. So a great example is, hey, a guy comes in walking in from outside, he's wet. What's wrong? They're wet. So what? You know, it changes, right, if he just came from his house where his toilet blew up. It changes if there's a water main just broke on Main Street. It changes if it's raining outside, right? So understanding that so what of him being wet makes a change in what you're looking at doing. So if they're wet from it raining, that means it's raining outside. It's probably going to be raining when you leave. Therefore, you want to put a rain jacket on or grab an umbrella before you leave. People do this instinctively on their own when they think about it, but they don't think about looking at the business and taking a process to step back and look at the bigger picture. So it's a chance to sort of look at, think about your information, try and filter out that data, because there's data everywhere now. Is what can you do with data? How can you make it useful in information? By dealing in understanding and knowledge. That's where the money gets made. And if you can make it there and operate in that space, that's your money-making space, at least in my opinion, for what it's worth. As we look at the other steps here real quick, as I'm getting close on time. Co-development, so again, that's just like we talked about the Army problem-solving process. That's your options. You're coming up with different options to help the boss out. You're going to analyze your options as you're looking at things, try and make sure you understand what's going on and the consequences of using those. You're going to be able to compare them. And again, that cost, benefits, and trade-offs. The trade-offs is the key to understanding. That's how you know which option is better and why. If you can make that argument, hey, boss, if I can spend $10,000 extra, I can get this for you. That's where the understanding truly lies at as you're looking at things. The boss makes a decision, decides where to direct resources to the best course of action. We talk about their orders production and going through, completing the plan that's going through. I think that's it. Yeah. Whoops. So any questions on MDMP before I move on to the next process? All right, this is going great. I love one-way conversations, especially when I have the microphone. All right, troop leading procedures. As again, these are troop leading procedures known when we have a very well-defined problem. It's very simple, very easy, quote unquote. But it's also designed when you don't have a team. This is designed for one person to do by themselves. When my boss told me I'm doing a keystone speech, I troop led myself through these steps to make sure I had everything ready to go for what's going on up here. So, hey, he gave me a mission. Hey, you're giving a keystone speech. Hey, it's a 35, 40-minute speech. For time for questions. It's going to be on Wednesday night at 5 o'clock. Very well defined, very well understood. And I'm supposed to drop some knowledge bombs on you guys. Got it. Issue a warning order. Us in warning orders, this means an alert. Hey, I need to get ready for this thing coming up. I got 72 hours to figure something out. I need to get moving. I made a plan. I got my slides together. I briefed them together. Came up with something. I didn't have to initiate movement because my desk is right there, so I maybe moved not very far where I needed to go. I conducted reconnaissance. You can probably ask the guys here that I work with. I came up here twice doing rehearsals, making sure everything worked. I changed the batteries out on things, make sure I had batteries that worked on things, make sure my screen projected right, learned that my colors come up, gray comes out as pink. So I'm ready to talk about that, so there wasn't any surprises in what I'm trying to do. I completed the plan. Based on what I saw, I had some font that was too small. I had some boxes that weren't right. I went back, I fixed my slides, I changed my pitch, I changed my order. I made sure everything flowed well as what I was trying to do based on my rehearsal. I then told myself what I need to do, and right now I'm executing, I'm supervising, refining. So when I do this speech next time, I know what I need to change to make it even better. And so that's something you do by yourself. If you have any employee, an intern, something new, you just need a checklist to follow on how to do something. This is the way you can start to do that. But make it your own and explain what that means. When you say, hey, go conduct reconnaissance, explain to your subordinate you're telling that to, what does that mean? What does that look like? What do you expect? So otherwise, they're going to make their own expectation of what that means and looks like. Any questions on this before I move on? So that's all the planning process, the first step of the operations process. Next is preparation. So that's great. You plan. You got this great idea of what you want to do. You got a plan. You're looking and thinking about. Now, how do you get ready for it? And what we've realized is as you plan and prepare, that's all stuff you can control. That's stuff that you have a say in what happens, just like a soccer game or a football game. How much training you do, how many reps you take, that's all stuff you do. But comes game day, that execution, that's when things are different, right? That's things you don't control. And so you try as a leader, you try to control as much as you can, try to limit luck, and be the best that you can be in what you're doing. And so you're trying to do, as you prepare things, you rehearse, you practice, you organize, you're always improving situation understanding, you're assessing what your plan was, those assumptions and facts. Sometimes facts become assumptions. That gets really funky when that happens. And then we use a big thing called rehearsals. We'll walk through, we'll put a big map on the ground, and I've seen a map as large as a basketball gym, and we'll physically walk on the map, saying what they're doing at time and space and purpose, so everybody can see and understand what's going on, so everybody has an idea in an organization what's happening. Next we come to execution. Execution is making a plan and action. That's great. You have a great plan. Like I said, talked about earlier, that direction. That's great. You told everybody about it. But then you got to do something with it, right? You got to take action. Entrepreneurs, by nature, their very nature, are action takers. They initiate movement and get things done. They solve problems. That's what they do. But as you're making execution there, there's time to make decisions based on your assessments. And so we have yet another process called the rapid decision-making and synchronization process. So let me see if I can try to explain this real quick. At one point, imagine this is time, going from on the bottom of the scale. You made a plan, you're preparing for that plan, and this dot is now. Your future can go in a variety of directions, but you're trying to get where your end state you've directed earlier. You know where you want to go, but things are going to change, right? Hey, you're going to have somebody show up late and not open the shop on time. Hey, you're going to have somebody who gets their car hit, and we can't do what we're trying to do. Hey, somebody forgot to charge their laptop. There's going to be problems, right? So how do you get your plan back on? You're going to make execution decisions. And those are decisions you make. You just make them by institution, and you just know that, okay, here's what we're going to do as things are going on. But sometimes a threat happens. Hey, COVID happens. Nobody saw it. It's taking off plan. That's a threat. Sometimes, hey, you have catastrophic success. Hey, we expected 100 people came through today. 1,000 people came through. What are we going to do? And so there's a chance to take a relook, come back and reframe your problem, come up with a new plan, and go forward and re-execute to get to your desired end state. And so we have those 5 steps listed on the far left there, or your right, describing how we do that and think about things. The key for this process is you already have an existing plan. This isn't a way to think about using these steps. If you don't have a plan to work off of, this isn't going to get you where you need to go. But it modifies, changes, and helps you adapt to changing circumstances, changing environment as you're looking at things. Lastly, assessing. We keep talking about that. Always looking, always trying to determine what's going on, whether you're making progress towards your goal. If you're not making progress, what can you do to get there, and how do you do that? Again, there's all sorts of ways to do that. You can plan on collection information. You do 360-degree surveys. You're always looking at things, but you're always assessing, making sure you're going toward where you need to go. And then based on that, your sessions, those are going to make decisions. They're going to make, as I talked earlier, with the execution, your adjustment and execution decisions. All right, so real quick, I've always been taught, I tell you what I'm going to tell you, I tell you what I told you, I tell you and then I tell you what I told you. So I went through the operations process very quickly. I showed you what leaders are going to do in that process. I showed you the 4 different planning processes, when you want to use them, what's going on with them, the best time to look at them and think about them. And I did real quick at RDSP, the Rapid Decision Making and Synchronization Process, talking about how to do things in execution. Now, fun fact, all the stuff I just showed you is open source. Everything the Army does is your taxpayer dollars in action. So all this stuff you can copy, make it your own. You can make it and change it. It's all there for you to use. Here's the 2 manuals I used to find most of this information at. Here's a website that you can find all of our doctrine at. It's a fun site, armypubs.army.mil. Why you have Army in there twice, I don't know, but that's the Army for you. But you just go pull up publications, find out your fund types, field manuals, ATPs, ADPs, all those other various acronyms. There's some fun stuff on here, like survival manual is really fun. It's got some neat stuff in there. I highly recommend it. With that being said, I think I'm right about time. What questions can I help with or concerns do people have? And if you're embarrassed, you can hit me afterwards. I'll be here for a little bit.